Rupert Lowe stood up in Parliament. He did what almost nobody in that building has the spine to do. He named it, he quantified it, he put the numbers in front of the people who are supposed to be governing us, looked them dead in the eye, and said, where are they? Where are the 53,000 migrants who have absconded from immigration bail? Where are the 736 foreign criminals who have vanished off the face of the earth? Where are they? And what did Labour do? What did this government, elected on a promise to restore order and control to our borders, actually do when confronted with those numbers? They lost it. Completely, utterly, embarrassingly lost it. They mocked him. They sneered. They reached for the lowest form of political deflection, personal attack, because they had nothing else. Because there is nothing else. Because the numbers are real, and they know it, and they are praying to God that you don't. Let me take you back. Let me give you the full picture, because the BBC certainly isn't going to. Rupert Lowe is not, and I want to be clear about this, some fringe figure shouting from the sidelines. This is a sitting member of Parliament. He represents Great Yarmouth. He won his seat. He went to Westminster to do a job. And the job, as far as he's concerned, is to represent the people who sent him there. The working-class people of a coastal English town who are watching their communities change beyond recognition and being told by the political class that they're imagining it, that they're paranoid, that they're racist for even noticing. He left Reform UK, we'll get to that. But the reason he left, the reason the split happened, is itself enormously revealing. Because if you listen to what Lowe himself said at the time, the issue wasn't policy differences. It wasn't about money, or strategy, or any of the usual Westminster soap opera rubbish. The issue, according to Lowe, was that Nigel Farage was uncomfortable with how far he was willing to go on mass deportations.
Think about that. He was too hardline on immigration for Reform UK, the party that built its entire brand on stopping the boats. The party that spent years telling us it was the only outfit serious about fixing this mess. Even they got cold feet when Rupert Lowe started saying the quiet part loud. And what is the quiet part? The quiet part is this. It is not enough to stop new people coming in. Not anymore. The damage has already been done. The numbers are already here. And if you want to actually fix this country, if you want to actually reverse what has happened to British towns, British schools, British women walking home at night, then you have to be willing to talk about sending people back. Not just the new arrivals on the dinghies, the ones already here, the ones on benefits, the ones in social housing, the ones who have shown, through their behavior, through their values, through their actions, that they have no intention of becoming British in anything other than name.
That is what Lowe is saying, and the political establishment, left, right and centre, absolutely cannot handle it. Now let's talk about what actually happened in Parliament, because I want you to understand the full texture of this exchange, not just the highlights clip that circulated on Twitter. Lowe secured a debate. He put the motion on the order paper. He called it illegal migrants, unknown whereabouts. And he came prepared. 600 parliamentary questions to the Home Office. 600. And what did he get back? No data. Not centrally collected. Disproportionate costs to retrieve. He documented it. He assembled it. He turned up with evidence that would make your stomach turn. He told the House about a 35-year-old Iranian small boat migrant who raped a 15-year-old girl. He was already known to German police. He'd been convicted of assault in Germany. He told that girl she could be his. And I'm going to use his words here because they matter. His sex doll. He dragged her down an alleyway, and he raped her. And her mother, this poor woman, asked the only question that matters. Why was he in this country? Why was he in this country? And Lowe put that question to Parliament. Not rhetorically, not as a campaign slogan, as a demand, as a challenge, as a moral reckoning for every single person sitting in those green benches who voted for the policies, who supported the system, who cheered on the human rights lawyers and the NGOs and the open border think tanks that made it possible for that man to be on British soil. What did Labour do? What did the government minister get up and say in response to that? He told a joke about canoeists. No, I'm not making that up. The Labour minister stood at the dispatch box and brought up the fact that Lowe had previously, and this is true, and yes, it's embarrassing, mistaken a group of charity rowers for illegal migrants on social media. It was a blunder. Lowe got it wrong. He admitted it. Fine, it happened. But here's the thing. That is what Labour had. That is the best they could do. A man stands in Parliament and reads out the story of a raped 15-year-old girl and asks the government to account for 53,000 people who have disappeared from the immigration system, and the government's response is to call him King Canut and bring up a tweet about canoeists. That is not governance. That is not even competent political deflection. That is panic. That is the behavior of people who know they are standing on quicksand and are praying nobody looks down. But let's talk about her, because the title of this piece mentions her specifically, and she deserves her own examination. The Labour MP in question, and there were several who chimed in, several who took their shots, represents everything that is wrong with the modern Labour Party. Everything. She sits in Parliament, presumably elected by constituents who are experiencing the same pressures as everyone else in this country, the same NHS waiting lists, the same housing crisis, the same school places disappearing, the same community centres converted into asylum accommodation. She was sent to Westminster to represent those people, and when confronted with the evidence, not opinion, evidence, of what is happening to this country, she did not engage with it.
She did not dispute the numbers seriously. She did not offer a credible alternative. She performed outrage.
That is the tell. That is always the tell. When someone is losing an argument on the facts, they don't attack the facts. They attack the person presenting them. They call you a racist. They call you a dangerous. They call you a far-right extremist. They reach for the emergency lever marked "Shut this conversation down immediately," because they know that if ordinary British people are allowed to sit with this information for more than 5 minutes, the game is up. And she lost it. She genuinely lost it. Because Lowe didn't give her the easy target. He didn't say something that could be cleanly clipped and packaged as bigotry. He said 53,298 people have absconded from immigration bail. He said 736 foreign criminals have vanished. He said the Home Office won't tell us where they are. He said women in this country are scared.
And every single one of those statements is either true or the government has failed to prove it false. And the minister's own response confirmed that when he said, "We do not comment on unverified leaks." Not false, not wrong. Unverified. That is the word they chose, which means they're not willing to say he's lying. They're just refusing to say he's right. Because if they confirm the numbers, they own the crisis. And they would rather leave 53,000 people unaccounted for in the immigration system than stand up in Parliament and admit that this country has lost control.
Now, I want to take a step back and put this in context, because this isn't just about one debate and one evening in Westminster. This is a pattern. This is a consistent, sustained, deliberate effort by the British political establishment to conceal the true scale of what has happened to this country over the last 2 decades. Think about what we've been told. We were told that immigration brings economic benefits. We were told the figures would come down. We were told the asylum system was being reformed, was being fixed, was under control. We were told by Theresa May that she wanted a hostile environment for illegal migrants, and then when she actually tried to implement it, she was vilified, destroyed, her legacy reduced to the Windrush scandal. As if the lesson to draw from Windrush was not be more careful with bureaucracy, but never try to enforce immigration law again. We were told by Boris Johnson that he had a world-beating plan to stop the boats.
We were told by Rishi Sunak that the boats would stop. The Rwanda scheme, which the courts tore apart, which lawyers got rich fighting, which every progressive institution in this country worked overtime to sabotage, was the flagship policy of a conservative government for the better part of 2 years. And it removed exactly 0 people. 0.
And now we have Labour, who came in promising to restore order and control, which was a very carefully chosen phrase, order and control, not stop the boats, not send them back, not reduce numbers. And what have they actually done? They've increased removals. Yes, the numbers they cite are real. Nearly 60,000 removals since they took office, they say. Forced returns up 45%. Deportations of foreign national offenders up by 1/3. Fine, I'll take those numbers at face value. But here's the question. If you're removing people at that rate, and you still have 53,000 people who've absconded from the immigration system, and the backlog in the asylum system is still enormous, and people are still crossing the channel every single day, what does that tell you about the scale of the problem? It tells you that the system is so far gone, so comprehensively overwhelmed, that even increased enforcement is barely making a dent.
You're bailing out a boat with a teaspoon while the hole gets bigger. And Rupert Lowe is standing on the deck, pointing at the hole. And Labour is shouting at him about the teaspoon.
Let me talk about the Muslim dimension, because it matters, and it is the part of this conversation that people are most determined not to have. The framing of illegal immigration in this country has for years been deliberately stripped of any cultural or religious specificity. We talk about migrants, we talk about small boat crossings, we talk about asylum seekers. We use language that is deliberately abstract, deliberately neutral, deliberately designed to prevent you from forming a picture in your mind. Because if you form a picture, if you actually look at who is crossing the channel, where they are coming from, what values they hold, what they believe about women, about gay people, about Jews, about the infidels who live in the country they've just arrived in, the picture becomes very uncomfortable indeed. Look at the countries Lowe himself cited in his proposed red list immigration policy: Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, Pakistan, Syria, Iran, Sudan, Bangladesh.
These are not random selections. These are countries with specific, documented, measurable problems with extremism, with honor-based violence, with FGM, with forced marriage, with attitudes towards women that would land you in a British court if you expressed them openly. These are countries where surveys consistently show that significant percentages of the population support Sharia law, support the death penalty for apostasy, support violence against women who dress immodestly.
Now, are all Muslim migrants extremists? Of course not. Obviously not. No serious person is saying that. And if that's your takeaway from this conversation, you've either not been listening or you're being deliberately obtuse. But are we allowed to notice? Are we permitted as a free people, in a democracy with a free press, to notice that certain cultural and religious values are incompatible with British life? Are we allowed to have that conversation without being called racists and Islamophobes and fascists and all the rest of it? Because here's the thing. The same political left that will not let you say any of this, the same MPs who shout and scream and lose it when Rupert Lowe stands up in Parliament, those same people in many cases represent constituencies that are predominantly Muslim. They have spent years cultivating those communities. They have spent years importing those votes.
And they have spent years telling those communities that they are victims. Victims of British racism, victims of Islamophobia, victims of the hostile environment, as a way of cementing loyalty, cementing the vote, and ensuring that anyone who raises legitimate concerns about cultural integration can be immediately accused of targeting those voters. It is a protection racket. It is a political protection racket. And the British working class, the white working class in particular, but also the Indian Hindu community, the Sikh community, the Black Caribbean community, who, by the way, have their own very well-founded grievances about what mass immigration has done to their communities, are the ones paying the price.
We have seen in this country, over the last decade, a series of events that should have shattered the consensus, that should have forced a genuine national reckoning. The Rotherham abuse scandal, Telford, Rochdale, Oldham, Oxford, hundreds of girls, overwhelmingly white, working-class girls, systematically groomed, raped, trafficked, over years, and in some cases decades, by gangs of men who were overwhelmingly of Pakistani Muslim heritage. And the police knew, the councils knew, the social workers knew, and they said nothing, did nothing, covered it up, because they were scared of being called racist. Let that sink in. Officers of the British state, people whose job it was to protect children, allowed children to be raped because they were afraid of the accusation of racism. That is what political correctness costs. That is the bill.
And it was paid, not by the political class, not by the Guardian columnists, not by the Labour MPs who screamed about Islamophobia, while little girls were being passed around in houses in Rotherham. It was paid by the girls, by the children, by the families that the system abandoned. And when people like Rupert Lowe stand up and say, we cannot keep importing large numbers of people from cultures where women are treated as property, where girls are fair game, where the rules of the host country are beneath contempt, the Labour benches erupt. The same Labour benches that were silent for years, while those girls were being abused. The same Labour benches that had the nerve, the absolute brass neck, to accuse the people raising this issue of being the dangerous ones.
That is what she lost it about. That is why the Labour MP couldn't keep it together. Because Lowe wasn't just making a political point. He was holding up a mirror, and what she saw in it was unbearable. Let me address the counter-arguments, because I believe in engaging with the other side, even when the other side isn't engaging with me. The first counter-argument is the economic one. Immigration is good for the economy. Immigrants contribute. They work. They pay taxes. They fill jobs that British people won't do. And there is some truth in this. Historically, the Windrush generation, the East African Asians in the 1970s, the Polish workers who came after EU enlargement, there are genuine stories of contribution. Labour MP Barry Gardiner tried to make exactly this point when he got into it with Lowe, citing wave after wave of historical migration that benefited Britain. But there's a difference between controlled, skilled, culturally compatible migration and what we have now. There's a difference between bringing in nurses and engineers and between processing hundreds of thousands of asylum claims a year, most of which are from countries that are not at war, most of which are by men who have passed through multiple safe countries before they got here. There's a difference between people who want to become British and people who want to live in Britain while maintaining the exact culture and value system they brought with them. And when you look at the actual cost, the housing, the NHS, the schools, the social care, the legal aid, the benefits, the net economic contribution of mass low-skilled immigration is at best deeply questionable, and at worst a complete myth used to shut down debate. The second counter-argument is the humanitarian one. These are desperate people. They are fleeing war and poverty. We have a moral obligation.
And yes, we do have a moral obligation. Britain has always offered genuine sanctuary to genuine refugees. Nobody serious is arguing against that. But there is a difference between a refugee and an economic migrant. There is a difference between someone fleeing the Taliban and someone who has decided, rationally and understandably, that life in Britain is better than life in Albania or Morocco or Bangladesh. Both things can be true simultaneously. You can understand why someone wants to come here and still believe that your country cannot absorb unlimited numbers of people and still believe that you have an obligation to your own citizens first. The third counter-argument, and this is the one that really gets deployed when all else fails, is the racism argument. Talking about Muslim migrants is Islamophobic. Citing crime statistics by country of origin is racist. Proposing a red list of countries is discriminatory. And look, I'm not going to pretend there aren't people in this debate who are motivated by genuine racial hatred. There are, and they should be called out. But the racism accusation has been so grotesquely overused, so cynically deployed as a debate stopper, so consistently aimed at the wrong targets, at the people raising real concerns rather than the people committing real crimes, that it has lost virtually all its power. When you cry wolf often enough, people stop fearing the wolf. And that, ironically, is far more dangerous for genuine racial harmony in this country than anything Rupert Lowe has ever said in Parliament.
Let me talk about where this goes, because I think we are at an inflection point. Lowe launched Restore Britain. It became a formal political party in February 2026. Within days, Elon Musk, the most influential private citizen on the planet, endorsed it, saying Lowe was the only one who can fix Britain. You can think what you like about Musk. You can find him irritating, erratic, provocative. But when the richest man in the world is pointing at your country and saying that the only person talking sense is a man the political establishment has spent months trying to destroy, that is a signal. That is a very loud signal that something is badly wrong, and the political establishment's response to double down, to keep calling Lowe dangerous, to keep calling his supporters racist,
to keep insisting that the 53,000 absconded migrants are not a crisis, that the crime statistics are not real, that the women frightened to walk through their own towns are imagining it, that everything is fine and the only problem is the people saying otherwise.
This is not a sustainable position. Politically, culturally, electorally, it is not sustainable. The polling tells you that. The reform surge tells you that. The fact that Labour, the party of the working class, the party that once represented every coal miner and steel worker in this country, is now hemorrhaging votes to a man they suspended and tried to destroy, tells you that. The British public are not stupid. They can see what is happening on their streets. They can see it in their children's schools, where classes are being disrupted by children who don't speak English, and teachers who are not equipped to cope. They can see it in their GP surgeries, where they wait 6 weeks for an appointment because the surgery is overwhelmed, They can see it in their town centers at night, where the atmosphere has changed in ways that are subtle and undeniable, and which everyone acknowledges privately and nobody is allowed to say publicly.
And when someone finally says it publicly, when someone stands up in the mother of all parliaments and says, "This is what is happening. Here are the numbers. Here are the names. Here is the evidence," the response from the people who are supposed to be governing us is to call him King Canut and make jokes about canoeists.
I want to end on something Lowe said that I think is the most important thing anyone has said in that parliament in years. He said the British people are not stupid. He said they can see their communities radically changing. They can feel their streets becoming more unfamiliar, more dangerous, more menacing, and they feel ignored, abandoned, thrown to the wolves. That language, thrown to the wolves, is not hyperbole. That is the lived experience of millions of people in this country. The women who contacted Lowe saying they fear for their lives. The parents who are scared to let their children walk to school. The working class communities who were promised that immigration was being managed, controlled, reduced, and who watched it spiral, year after year, government after government, while the people responsible retreated to their nice areas, their good schools, their private security, and told everyone else to check their prejudice.
The Labour MP lost it because she had no answer. Because when you've spent your entire political career calling people like Rupert Lowe racists, and then a Rupert Lowe stands up in Parliament with 600 parliamentary questions worth of evidence and reads out the story of a raped 15-year-old girl whose rapist should never have been allowed into this country, you don't have a rhetorical move left. All you have is the scream. All you have is the meltdown. All you have is the hope that if you perform outrage loudly enough and for long enough, people will look at the performance instead of the argument.
It's not working anymore. The argument is winning. The evidence is mounting. And the British people, patient, polite, endlessly tolerant, are running out of both. Something is going to give. The only question is whether the political class wakes up and changes course before it does, or whether they keep performing, keep sneering, keep calling the canoeist joke in Parliament, while 53,000 people with no fixed address are somewhere out there on British streets. I know which way I'm betting.